Okay, we're going to get started here. Hi, welcome to the AskTOM office hours session. I'm Mark Scardina, Director of Product Management with the Autonomous Health Framework. And basically each month, we're here to have you ask your questions and us provide expert answers. This is being recorded and all your lines are muted. So since this is recorded and we're going to upload it to YouTube after the session, we'd like you to ask your questions via chat so that we can make sure your questions as well as our answers are uploaded properly in the recording. So with that, and please do not put any code or SRs in the chat. This is basically not something that is specific to support, but is there for your education, and we'd like you to be interactive as much as possible. So let's begin. I would like to turn it over to have Giri, our expert, introduce himself to kick things off, and then we'll get to your questions.
Hi, everybody. My name is Giri, or Girdhari Gantiala. I have been with Oracle for more than 14 years, and since I started at Oracle, I have been working on making the life easy for the DBAs, basically. So when you have a cluster and you want to make sure that my cluster is healthy and compliance, earlier we didn't have, and DBAs have to do these things manually. And when I joined, we started working on this tool called EXAchk or ORAchk to make sure that our system is compliant to the Oracle's best practices. So since then, I have been doing that, and I'll be more than happy to answer questions about this.
All right, thank you, Gary. Just be advised here in case something is mentioned during this presentation. This is our safe harbor statement that we are not actually revealing any new products going forward here that you should rely on. So we've got a few people participating, so we'll open up the chat to any questions. Please type in your questions and we can get going here, or I've got some if you don't have any initially, but we'd like to get to your questions first. Any questions? Okay, while they're composing them, let's start off with a couple here, and you addressed the first one a bit already as to what Oracle's goal was in developing ORAchk and EXAchk.
Yes, as I said, our goal is to make sure that Oracle system, be it a RAK cluster, single instance database, or any engineered system, is configured to the standard and best practices given by Oracle. So making sure that all the parameters are set properly, and all the patches are applied, all the configurations are good, and making sure that system is healthy and running smoothly, rather than later realizing that, oh, we were missing a patch which caused an outage. And so to avoid all these problems and put the lesson learned from the customers into a software, and then one customer made mistake or one customer ran into an issue, but then take that learning, put into the software itself, and then ship it with the next release of the patch or next release of the software itself. That was the goal to develop ORAchk or EXAchk.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Another point is this covers the complete stack. So as you know, Oracle systems are pretty wide, and multiple components work together for a complete system to work. So you have, take an example of Exadata, you have hardware, then you have operating system, you have clusterware, and Exadata software, and CRS, and database, and application. So our goal is to consider this as one complete unit with multiple components and making sure that we check each and every part of the stack and component and making sure that they are all compliant with regards to making sure that all the components are configured properly and working with each other and configured properly. So that was one of the main reason to consider it as a single unit rather than multiple components checking their own thing. There are multiple combinations. This platform, this hardware, this version, this database version, this Exadata version, this application, then you need these settings. And we know that and we understand that. And that's why we can precisely target and recommend like this is a proper setting for this configuration.
Okay. So we've talked about ORAchk and EXAchk as if they're the same. Are there any differences?
Yes, they are targeted for different systems. EXAchk is for engineered systems, except ODA. So Exadata and EXAlogic, Oracle Cloud Machine, Supercluster, any engineered system from Oracle, you're supposed to run EXAchk except ODA. And on ODA plus all generic system like on-premise system where it is not running on engineered system, rather running on a customer's own hardware. We just it's Oracle software running on customer's hardware. That's where you will run ORAchk. So it could be a rack, it could be a single instance database, or other softwares supported by ORAchk. That's where you will run ORAchk. So the tagline here is EXAchk for engineered systems minus ODA, and then everywhere else ORAchk.
I see. Well, you obviously anticipated my next question because you basically said that you should use ORAchk on ODA, correct?
Correct. You should use ORAchk on ODA, and it is included as part of the ODA build. And there's a command line provided is ORAchk CLI or ODA CLI as well, which will invoke ORAchk. But yes, on ODA, which is an engineered system, but you will run ORAchk. There are validations in place. So I get sometimes questions from customers. What happens if I run ORAchk on, let's say, Exadata, or if I run EXAchk on ODA? So it won't work. It'll say, oh, looks like you are running on ODA, so you should run ORAchk. Or if you run ORAchk on Exadata, it'll say, oh, this is an Exadata, and you should run EXAchk rather than running ORAchk. And we did that because we used to get questions from customers. I ran EXAchk on Exadata. ORAchk is there to do the database best practices for my generic systems. Do I have to run it again? So to avoid that confusion, we handle it this way. So it knows where I'm being run, and it knows what tool is supposed to run there, and that's taken care of by code itself.
Okay, sounds good. So continuing on a bit, you mentioned that ORAchk and EXAchk are now in the grid infrastructure and database homes. So what type of releases are we upgrading ORAchk and EXAchk in, now that we have a new release vehicle such as our release upgrades and release upgrade revisions?
Yes. So I'll start with ORAchk. ORAchk is included as part of the database itself since 11.204. And so 11.204, you'll find ORAchk in database home as well as in GI home. And after that, in 12.102, 12.2, and 18.1, you will find ORAchk at the same place where we started shipping. And then every PSU or RU, depending on what version you're running on, we will ship a new release of ORAchk with PSUs. So every PSU, you'll get a new ORAchk, and it'll be placed in the proper. So when you apply the PSU, it'll drop the ORAchk bits as well with the PSUs, and that's how you get the new release of ORAchk in Oracle Home. I
see. Okay, so we also make ORAchk EXAchk available on MOS. So I've heard that we recommend that people always get the latest MOS version. Is it always possible to upgrade to the latest MOS version, even though I've got a version already in my GI or database home?
Yes. The reason you might have to download it from MOS and upgrade to the latest, if you are applying the PSUs or RUs on the time, you don't have to go to MOS to download. But if you missed one PSU, and I know some customers don't apply PSU as soon as it is available. But if you want the latest ORAchk, you can get it from MOS and then stage it at the location where PSU will drop, which is Oracle Home Subtools. That's where you will. That's where PSU will drop a new ORAchk bits, and you can do the same thing. You just download it from the MOS and drop it there. Then you run the older version of ORAchk. It'll find, oh, there is a new version already available, and it'll upgrade itself, and then it'll run the newer version.
Okay, so I don't even need to actually actively do the upgrade. It'll find the archive that I downloaded.
Correct. If it is older than 120 days, that's a window. Mm-hmm. We stale the checks after 90 days. And the goal behind that is we want to make sure that you are always getting the latest checks and best practices, because the best practice 6 months back may not be a best practice now, or there may be new things which we learned in the last 6 months. So our goal is to always run the latest bits. And if you apply the PSUs, yes, you will always get, because PSUs are every 3 months. That's good enough for your bits to keep it healthy for 90 days. And if you haven't applied, but you want to get the latest ORAchk, as I said, get the zip, drop it at the location, Oracle Home Subtools, and then run older version. It'll find out there's a new version, it'll upgrade itself, and then it'll run the newer version.
Okay, sounds good. So this is the MOS note, correct, that you would get the latest version from?
That's for ORAchk, and there is one for EXAchk as well, yes.
Yes, okay. So what would happen though if I have upgraded, but then I apply an RU that perhaps has an older version to my installation?
Then remember, the upgrade is automatic, and during the upgrade process, it checks for what's the current version being run and what's the current version archive available there. So if the version coming from RU is older than what I'm running, it won't upgrade.
Okay, so it during the normal RU upgrade process, if it were to find an older version, the RU process would go ahead and have it upgraded. But if I had in fact downloaded a newer version, then it would just be a no-op, and it would just continue to use the newer version.
Correct.
Okay.
If you have a new version and you apply RU, you will continue to use new version what you upgraded manually, and RU won't overwrite your newer bits.
I see. Okay. All right, that sounds good. So I understand now that we are running ORAchk or EXAchk as a daemon instead of simply interactively. What's the rationale of running it this way? Why should I run it this way? Yeah,
when we introduced this long back, we didn't have this feature where you can schedule a run of EXAchk or ORAchk, and then after a few years, it was us like, no, it's too much to run it every month or every week, and can we do something where I schedule it once and then it runs whatever schedule I define? So goal here is customer configure it once where it says, I want to run it weekly, I want to run it bi-weekly, or I want to run it monthly. And then it'll keep running on that frequency and keep sending you the result, which is a report in HTML, or if you have configured some other way for the aggregation dashboard, it'll upload it there. But goal is to configure it once and then let it run on a configured scheduled frequency, and then it'll just keep doing what it needs to do.
I see. So do I have to run it on each node, or how often should I actually run it?
No, you don't have to run on each node. As I said in introduction, we consider the entire system as one unit. So you run it from one of the database nodes. If it is a Exadata system, you run it from database server. And we reach to the remote database servers as well as cells and switches from the first database server. If it is a generic rack system, you run it from one of the database server. So you will never have to run it on each node. Only from one node, and it could be any node. It doesn't have to be first node. It could be any node. And how often should you run it? There is no magic number to tell like this is the very good frequency. It depends on the customer's requirement. We would generally prefer to run it once a week. It's a very lightweight tool and doesn't cause any stress or a load on the system. Still, we would want to run it sometime when there is a lower stress on the system. So configure it sometime like maybe whenever your system is less loaded, and run it once a week, and then configure it to upload it to the central dashboard, or configure it to send the reports to the administrator, but run it once a week. And then before any maintenance, so you're applying a patch, you're doing an upgrade, so before or after patching, you can always do the on-demand run. But as far as a good number to run it using scheduler or daemon, I would recommend to do it once a week.
I see. Sounds good. So you mentioned that I'm running these periodically once a week, and so obviously I'm getting different scores with regards to my output and compliance. When it runs, say at 4 in the morning when my system is lightly loaded, and it finds a new issue, do I get a notification of that, or do I have to interactively look at the reports?
You will get notification if you have configured the email address while configuring the schedule of the daemon. So when you say set my scheduler to run it every Sunday or every Saturday at 4 a.m. in morning, then that's when you can define, with the schedule, you can define send me the reports, and that setting is called notification email. You say send me the results at this email address. And in that case, when it runs through the scheduler or daemon, what it does is it does a diff from the previous run. So it ran last week, it ran this week, and then it will do a diff. Are there new failures from last week to this week? So it'll send you the notification for all those new issues it found in this week's run in an email.
I see. That sounds quite useful then. So we just had a new release in May called 18.2, a bit ahead of the database release. But what are the significant new features that I can look forward to in this release?
Yes, our release are quarterly, so we try to have a new release every 3 months. Sometimes we get little late, but most of the time we end up getting every quarter a new release. And that's why we always ship it with a PSU, because PSU goes every quarter and we also ship every quarter. So whatever is our latest production release goes out with the PSUs as well. Mm-hmm. The May release, which is 18.2, and just an FYI, we changed the version format earlier. So we are following the database version format. Earlier it used to be 12.2, something like the database version format. Since database is switching to 18, we also switched to 18.2 in this format. Now in 18.2, the new features are the very important one is providing the REST support, so customer can configure ORAchk to call using REST endpoints. And another new feature is that's not in 18.2, but in the previous release, but we have rewritten this entire framework in Python. Earlier, it used to be Perl and Bash scripts. Now that has been rewritten in Python. So REST and rewriting in Python, and then new checks, and then we added one more feature. It's called run failed checks. That's something customer have always been asking, where I ran yesterday, it had 20 failures. I fixed most of them, and I want to make sure that my failures are fixed. So you can say, pick the last run and only checks which failed in the last run those checks. So we call them failed checks, and that's a command line option to run the failed only checks, and you don't have to review the full report, and it'll take little shorter to run only subset of checks.
I see. Oh, that sounds like a worthwhile addition.
Yep.
You mentioned that it's now been rewritten in Python. What's the rationale behind that?
Yeah, so this is, there are multiple reasons. One, and the most important one was platform independency, because if it is written in Bash and Perl, wherever we have Bash, we had issues for Windows, and tier 2 platforms like HPUX and AIX don't have the Bash by default installed. And anytime we ask customers to run ORAchk or EXAchk, well, it's not a problem for EXAchk, because EXAchk is mostly for engineered system. That's where you'll always find Bash. But for ORAchk, for generic rack and database customers, if we ask them to install Bash to run ORAchk, that's not a very easy ask, because they need a change ticket and to install something on production systems. So to remove that dependency, we chose to rewrite this in Python. Second reason was like the machine learning is a new theme, and we want to solve a lot of problems using the machine learning techniques. So Python is something which we chose because we can use the advanced algorithms in Python, which would have not been possible if it was in a Bash or something like that. So those were the two main reasons. There are multiple other small stuff we considered, but these were the two main reasons of the problems we wanted to solve to rewrite it in Python.
Is it any more performant or lighter weight in Python?
Yes, it is faster depending on the system. The heavy or the busier the system is, the faster ORAchk will be when you run the Python one. We have seen on some system like 3 times faster, on some systems 2 times faster. So yes, it is quite fast when you run the Python version of the EXAchk or ORAchk.
And I assume we're shipping Python with the product, so I don't have to go and download it onto my system?
Correct. All the builds, the Python itself, what we have a specific version requirement to run ORAchk. So we ship Python for each platform with ORAchk, and it'll use what we ship with ORAchk. We are not dependent on customer's system where the Python is. It may already be installed, but we won't use that. We will ship and we will use that Python to run ORAchk. So there is no dependency. That's the main problem we're trying to solve. Like earlier, you need Bash, and if you don't have a specific version of the Bash, you won't run it. In this case, everything is shipped and bundled, and we use what is part of the ship itself, and no external dependencies to run ORAchk or EXAchk.
Good. Sounds like a definite improvement. So you also mentioned REST. So what can I, as a customer, do with these REST interfaces?
You can REST is obviously to call ORAchk or EXAchk, run ORAchk or EXAchk where you are not physically on that system. You don't have to log into that system to run EXAchk. You can You can run it from any your development machine. You can run it from the browser. But the goal here is, without logging to that system, you can run. That's number one problem it is solving. And second, you can use it or integrate it with your other software and other tools. Earlier, it was hard to, suppose example is like I have written an application to do the dashboard, or Enterprise Manager itself also uses ORAchk to do the compliance checks. So if there is a REST endpoint, anybody who wants to do health checks or best practices, they can call these REST endpoints and integrate with their software. So those are the two main reasons or requirements we provided the REST interface for ORAchk.
I see. So when I do a get to cause ORAchk to be run, as an example, or is it a post? Which do I do to cause ORAchk to be executed?
So to run it, it is a post, and then to get the result, it is a get call.
I see. Okay. Do I get the result back in the same HTML format or JSON format, or how am I receiving the result?
There's no difference. It is same as what you're running it manually, so you'll get a zip file.
I get a zip file. I see. Okay. All right. So that'll just land on my remote system that I invoke the call from.
Correct. If it is a browser, it'll download to your desktop, and if it is a curl, then it'll get it to the location where you're running your curl command from.
I see. Okay. All right. That sounds reasonable. So we've talked about running, obviously, ORAchk, but is there a specific user that I need to be to run it locally or to install it as?
Yeah. So our recommendation is to run as root if you can. And depends on the type of system we're talking about. I take an example of Exadata, where you run EXAchk. We have a strong recommendation to run as a root. If you don't have a root, then it'll skip around 30% of the checks on Exadata database servers as well as on storage server if you don't run as a root. But if there is no root user, then yeah, you can run as a RDBMS software owner. So whoever owns the Oracle database, you can run as. You can run as a grid user as well. And that's where it's like if you have multiple RDBMS homes, every home is owned by different OS users, and then you have a grid infrastructure user. In that case, you might run it as a GI owner. But to make it simple and to have most of the checks done or all the checks done, our recommendation is to run as a root. But if you don't have it, you can always use sudo to run the root privilege checks, and you can run it as a RDBMS software owner or as a GI owner.
So does that include, so if I've got it running as a root daemon, as an example, as the root user, and I interactively run it, do I have to still run it as root, or can I, does it do the full checks if I invoke it as a grid user or Oracle database user?
So if you invoke as a non-root user, either a database user or a grid user, it'll, and if it is it is an interactive run, it'll ask you, how do you want to execute the root privilege checks? And that's where you say either I have the sudo privileges, I can run root checks using sudo. I will enter the root password if I have it. And if you have none of those, you can say skip the root privilege checks and run it as whatever you can do as a non-root user. Every check has a signature attached to it. Does it require root? And when you run it, the root privilege checks will be put in a separate script. And at the runtime, if you have root, it'll execute that script. If you don't, it'll simply skip those root privileges and run it as a non-root user, be it a database software owner or a GI owner.
Okay, so it doesn't just error those checks; it actually skips them when the privilege is not available.
Correct.
I see. Okay, that sounds reasonable. So obviously I'm pulling data out of my cluster from these runs. And some of that data may be sensitive if I'm moving it around. Is there the ability for ORAchk to mask sensitive data?
If you're asking to mask or change the data itself, no, but we have the feature where you can password protect the collections or a zip we generated from the system. So you can provide the password at the start of the run where you say encrypt the output files, and then at the end of the run it'll encrypt and you won't be able to use that until you provide the password. So we added that feature in last release where you can have a password protected output files.
Okay. So instead of, say, replacing node names or instance names or potentially IP addresses, things like that, I can just encrypt the entire file and therefore have it protected if I have to pass it around to other systems.
Correct. But remember, one thing, whatever ORAchk or EXAchk runs, that stays with customer unless customer uploads it to Oracle support. So nothing goes out. There's no like sending back to Oracle. Whoever has privileges, they will run it, they will collect it, and it will stay on that system. Moreover, you can encrypt it, but it stays there with the right permission. So if you're running as a root, the output files will be with the right read and write permission only for the root user. Even Oracle user will not be able to see those output files. Moreover, you can encrypt that zip. So until you enter the password, you won't be able to open the zip file itself.
I see. Okay, well, that sounds sufficient. So you mentioned about the ability that I may have at certain times to deal with SRs with regards to ORAchk. I assume that ORAchk actually is a supported utility. So how do I actually go about getting, is it supported the same way as the database and other Oracle software?
Correct. You can log an SR against ORAchk and EXAchk. There is a component in my Oracle support, and you select it's called system tools. And once you select system tools as a component, ORAchk, you will be able to log a SR against ORAchk or EXAchk. We work with Oracle support all the time where for some reason, most of the time the SRs are logged because customer has follow-up questions about the check itself. But whatever is the reason, either it is a troubleshooting, follow-up questions, more help, customer log SR for ORAchk or EXAchk. There are two. So once you select system tools, there are follow-up questions where it asks, is it for EXAchk or ORAchk? You select your proper component and then you log an SR against these tools in Oracle support.
So if even though I've downloaded it from Moss as an example, and it's not the version that is, ships with the version of my database, but I'm using it with, say I've got an 11.2 deployment and I'm using 12.2 or 18.2 ORAchk, there's still no issue with regards to getting support to that version, even though my base database or grid infrastructure is an earlier version.
That's correct. ORAchk or EXAchk are version agnostic. When we release a build, it works for all the versions from 10.2 and above. So even though your database is 11.2, you can get 18.2 ORAchk from Moss, or if you applied the PSU, I don't know whether we are releasing the PSUs for 11.204 anymore or not, but regardless, however you got it, PSUs or from Moss, it'll work for 11.204 database, and you can log an SR for 18.2 version of the ORAchk for your 11.204 database version.
I see. Okay, so it's basically fully supported, just like all Oracle products, even though I happen to have downloaded from Moss.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So we get a question frequently because obviously this is a runtime management tool, and in many cases I have Enterprise Manager as my operations runtime management application. Is ORAchk integrated with Enterprise Manager?
Yes, ORAchk is integrated with Enterprise Manager from Enterprise Manager version 13.1 and above. In 13.1, there was a separate plugin where customer will have to download the plugin and install that plugin on OMS to get the ORAchk integration. And in 13.2 and above, it is part of the Enterprise Manager build itself. So you can configure ORAchk from Enterprise Manager, you can run it, and you can view the findings of ORAchk or EXAchk in Enterprise Manager in a compliance dashboard in Enterprise Manager 13.1 and above.
I see. So how is there any setup required for me to make use of this, or where does it live in the Enterprise Manager, and how do I configure it?
Yes, you need to do a setup for your system. So in from Enterprise Manager, you will initiate this setup ORAchk part where similar to if you run on your standalone system, it will ask you some prompts like do you have the root password if you don't run as a root? What are the database you want to run it on? And what are the checks you want to run it on if you want to run a subset of checks? So all those questions are answered when you initiate it from Enterprise Manager, when you set it up from Enterprise Manager. Once it is set it up and you set the frequency, then it'll run on that frequency and upload the result in Enterprise Manager, or rather fetch the result in Enterprise Manager and show it in the compliance dashboard. But you need to do a setup, one-time setup for each system. So suppose Enterprise Manager is managing, let's say, 4 systems. You need to set up it on those 4 systems, and then future runs will happen on its own, and then get the result in Enterprise Manager.
So when you say systems, am I setting it individually on each database home or each grid home, or am I having to?
It is Oracle clusterware is considered a system for
okay.
And suppose if you have X-ray systems, then you have 8 compute nodes, 14 storage server, 3 IB switches. That's one system for EXAchk.
Okay.
If you have a rack cluster, which is 8 node rack cluster, that's one system for ORAchk. So you will set it up on 1 DB node for 8 node cluster, or you will set it up on 1 database server if it is a full X data cluster. So once for each system.
I see. But do I see the compliance score on the cluster target, or do I see it on the database target?
You will not see a score. So what we have done working with Enterprise Manager is every check has a target. And like host is a target, storage server is a target, ASM is a target, database server is a target, switch is a target. And even though EXAchk is run once on the entire system, you set it up to run it on one of the database server. Once the result comes back, and that comes as an XML, it has a signature where it says where it was run. Enterprise Manager will take that signature and plug that result under that target. So you will see EXAchk findings in compliance dashboard under each monitored target. So suppose you ran 400 checks, it'll plug 50 checks on database server, 50 checks on storage server, 50 checks on database, and so forth. So wherever that check is applicable, wherever that check executed, that will be plugged under the EM target from EXAchk result.
I see. Well, that sounds well integrated then. I'm assuming it is not deploying its own version of ORAchk or EXAchk. It is using the version that I already have installed on those targets, correct?
No, it's the other way. And that's what we are working on changing that. But as of now, the Enterprise Manager downloads the new version of the ORAchk, deploys it in its software library and run it from there. So OMS hosts it rather than we are depending on the target system to have EXAchk and ORAchk running. We are working on changing that, but as of now, this is deployed from the EM library itself and not from the target system.
Okay, but so the bits are run out of the EM software library.
Correct.
I see. Okay, so are they deployed with the agent, or are they just remotely run?
They are deployed using agent. Agent will take the libraries there, run it there in its own temporary location, and it'll keep it there. But customer doesn't have to install on target system. It is in the EM software library. Agent will pick it up and install it there, run it there, bring the result back.
Okay, but obviously we're going to integrate that a little better in the future then, it sounds like.
Correct, yeah. We are working on changing that model, and rather than being a push, it'll be a pull model in future.
Okay, I see. So you mentioned that there was a plugin, and so are we now part of the base EM, or do I need a pack to make use of it, like lifecycle management or any diagnostic pack, or do I just get it with the standard EM?
I think you get it as part of the standard EM installation. You don't need additional packs, but I would defer to talk to the appropriate folks in Oracle to find more about it. But as far as I know, it is part of the base EM, and you don't need any more licenses or packs to run ORAchk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that would make sense given the fact that it's being run from the targets. And I have confirmed, in fact, that you do not need to run you do not have to have additional licensed packs to make use of ORAchk, either on the cluster or GI targets or database targets.
Okay, good.
So we've talked about reports quite a bit here, and it's very useful that I can actually get different diffs from various runs of reports. But what facility do I have to interactively compare reports? How easily can I do that?
Yes, you can easily do it using a diff command line options, and that's a very genuine request or a requirement. I ran before the patching, I applied the patch, and I want to run it again after the patching to find out what changed on my system. So you can, that's one use case where you run it before the patching, apply your patch, run EXAchk again after the patching, and then you say EXAchk-diff, and then the zip from the run 1 and the zip from the run 2. And that's how you will get the differences. And the diff report is divided in 4 parts, where the first part says, what are the checks which were with the different status? It was pass in run 1, pass in run 2. And then the second section is the checks which were there in the report 1, but not in report 2. We call them a unique checks. The third one is vice versa. They were there in report 2, but not in report 1. And then the fourth section is where everything matches. But and it's similar to what we have with our main report. It's an HTML report. It provides what check, what was the status on what node, and so forth. It's very detailed to provide you a very good view of what changed in my system.
Okay, but that is my running actually local on the system and doing a command line diff, basically. Is that correct?
Correct. When you do an interactive run. For the scheduled run, for the daemon, as I said, we do the automatic diff and send the reports as part of the notification email.
Okay, but if I've got a bunch of systems, is there a way to keep basically all of these reports in a single location and work with them more easily in a central location?
Yes, I'll answer that. But before that, I want to answer one more use case for the diff. I have a system, let's say test system or a staging system, where I am running the same software and same load and same binaries. It works perfectly fine there, but in production, it's different. It's not working the way, and I want to find out what's the difference between these two systems. So you can run EXAchk on your staging system, and then you can run EXAchk on a production system. And there is a built-in validation where if you do a diff between two different systems, then you have to use some additional options to do a diff, but you can compare two systems using the diff option as well. So it's
okay.
Before patching, after patching, when the status changed or the software changed on the system, that's a good use of the diff. And the second one is when you compare two systems, good working one versus the one where you want to solve the problem, and you can compare and say what's different in these two systems, and that's how you find out the differences using the diff command.
Okay,
now about the one place, we have so remember, EXAchk and ORAchk are run on the target system, and for one customer, you might have hundreds of systems, tens of systems. And one way is you review each report after every run, but for that, you will get lots of email if you have the daemon configured and sending you the reports, or if you're not running the daemon, if you're doing the on-demand run or one-off runs, then it even becomes harder because you will have to review many HTML reports. So to solve this problem, we provide an application called Collection Manager, where you can set up the EXAchk and ORAchk to upload the result to a database, and then it does the aggregation as well as a diff of the runs from ORAchk and EXAchk, and you can see those all finding in a central dashboard in one place using Collection Manager. That is one of the way. There are other different ways as well, but as of now, the most used one is Oracle Collection Manager.
I see. So you mentioned that I have to upload this into a database. So is there a specific version of the database I have to use? Is it something that I have to have a license for? Can you give me some details in that regard?
As for the version, we use the application extracts from the database, which is version 4 and above. So I think it is 11.2 and 4, 11.2 or 4 and above. You will have Apex 4 and above. So that's the version requirement. Again, for the licensed, for licenses to run Collection Manager, I don't know if you have an answer. Go ahead. I don't know the specific answer if you need a license to run a Collection Manager.
So I do know the answer to this one is, at this point in time, the database that you have to host this Apex app in has to be a licensed database and is not an infrastructure database such as the OEM repository, as an example, where we're giving you an infrastructure license. In this particular case, if you want to make use of Collection Manager using the Apex app, it has to be a licensed database. A question is, does it need to be Enterprise Edition license, or can it just be standard? Is a standard edition fine for this application?
Yes, standard edition is totally fine for this.
Okay, but it does have to be a licensed database at this point. Okay, so we've still got a few people around. I haven't seen any further questions in the chat. Now's your opportunity. If there's any questions, please enter it, and if not, we'll summarize and move forward here. Okay, well, I want to thank Gary for being on with us, as well as our participants. Next month, we're going to focus on another very valuable OS tool product called Trace File Analyzer and its new 18.2 release. So same Tuesday, fourth Tuesday of the month at same time, 1900 UTC or 12 noon Pacific time. So please sign up and get your questions ready to go. Also, I want to point out that we have recorded these, and they are uploaded in the YouTube channel for AskTOM. So for those of you who want to not be involved interactively but want to take advantage of it post our sessions, They are made available shortly in a day or two after their recording, and you can subscribe to the AskTOM Office Hours YouTube channel to get the latest uploads for these videos. So thank you, Gary. Thank you for participants, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.